We be live. Hey.
Hello. We have a guest today.
Yes, a patron guest. Again, so guys, by the way, if you don't know, if you're a top tier patron, if you're like not like a $1 patron, but like a top tier patron, then you get to reach out to us and set up a discussion. And Vikram has been taking advantage of that. And today, Vikram wants to talk about Israel and Palestine. And he has a lot of questions. And I see like he already has sent me like 5 questions. And he wants to challenge us and also clarify a few things.
Wait, can you send me the questions? I want a preview.
Well, I don't know. Usually he sends me questions, and then when we get into the stream, everything changes
Goes out
around.
the window.
Yes, but
True.
hold on, I could put it. I'll put it in the private chat. Here, there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah.
Right.
To be clear, I don't really have a position on this. I'm gonna challenge Armin just to kind of learn more about the issue, but I don't really have any stake either way.
Okay. Well, but here's the thing. Actually, I think that I saw like Apostle Prophet saying like, "Oh, I'm not going to comment on it because our life is not affected by it," and people act.
I thought
like
that was ludicrous.
That was so ridiculous. You know, people especially with somebody with such a big platform like that, we all have even people that can affect like 2 other people's opinions. Like we all have some level of influence. For somebody like that to come and say that they don't have an impact, like no, yes you do. And you know, maybe if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine, but don't make it seem like it's not important to talk about. And even you know, when the ideas that you spread out there has an effect on people's behaviors and actions. Somebody like Apostle Prophet who's like actively fighting against Islam, why is he fighting against Islam? Because people's opinions and belief has an impact on their behavior. So how is that true with Islam and people's opinions and impact on politics and nationalism or ethnic nationalism? Do you think that doesn't have an impact? Does he not know that he has an audience in Israel and in Palestine? And even that, let's say that even people who don't live there, right? When we analyze the way people think about, you know, nationalism, ethno-nationalism, racism, religion, your views on them is a good exercise to form your views on your own, in your own country and in your own place, right? So, for example, if we forget Israel and Palestine, right? If we go, I don't know, into let's say fight between, I don't know, Chinese and Japanese, and show how baseless it is to have any form of nationalistic grudges against each other, and like debunk that, right? That, even if you have no stake in that and you're completely removed from that, somebody analyzing that and showing you how baseless that is might reflect in your own opinions on your own ethno-nationalists in your own country, even if you're completely removed from that struggle, right? So this is just like when we go back and like look at the history of this and this, we are now not only removed from those people through location, we are also removed from those people through time. But again, going and analyzing people's judgment on things and people's you know, moral standards and things, is a very effective way of you practicing and coming up with a standard of how you judge your own morality and how you judge like the things that you do and the views that you have. So the fact that people think like, oh no, I have no stake, so who cares? Like, well, okay, you don't want to care, that's fine. I'm not saying that you should care, but to then go out and say that, oh, the people who are caring, the people who have opinion, they're just pretending like they have an impact, and they're pretending that it matters. No, it does matter. Nobody's telling you to care, but for you to come and tell us that we shouldn't care, no, go fuck off. No, we care and it matters, I think. Yeah. Anyways, Vikram.
Yeah,
Coming in hot.
I'm gonna try to take his side. I think I kind of agree with him on this.
Okay, go on.
The issue is not about whether. I guess I'll repeat to you an argument you've made before.
I know I'm being aggressive, but with all due respect to Apostle Prophet and everything.
You know, the aggression makes it more fun. Like, So I kind of realized this could go different ways. I meant this in the cleanest possible way. I was saying that, so I understand apostate prophet's take because he's a content creator who focuses on a specific topic, and he might not feel confident to comment on a different topic like that. And quite often when you comment on topics you don't know much because you feel pressured to do it, you might just say ignorant things that would get you in more trouble than if you did not comment.
Vikram, you didn't listen. It's
Wait.
completely fine. I said, if you don't want to comment on something and you think that you don't have enough knowledge, or you're not even comfortable commenting, maybe even you do have knowledge on something, but you're just not comfortable taking a position. That is, I'm not judging you, anybody for that. Nobody should be forced into becoming active on anything. Like there are more topics out there than any of us could ever be involved in, right? I'm not like, pay attention to what I'm saying, because I made it very clear that I didn't suggest that everybody should be involved in this. What my point was, like, if you don't want to be involved, that's completely fine. And I wasn't being sarcastic when I said it's completely fine. I'm genuinely meaning it's completely fine. I'm not involved in many things that are worthy of some other people being involved in. But I'm just saying, then if you then go out further and say, like, oh, other people who are involved in this, they're pretending to know something about it that they don't. No, we're not. We actually do. And also to say, like, oh, they don't have an influence and it doesn't matter and they're wasting their time. That is, no, if you want to stay out of it, stay out of it. But it's completely worth our time to be involved in it. That's two separate things. Suze, you had your hand up.
Well, there was a few things I wanted to say. So with apostate prophet, like my immediate reaction to the video that he put out about how he doesn't want to talk about the 11-day war that we just had a ceasefire of, was I was struck by its apathy. And that was interesting to me because apostate prophet has criticized other religions like Hinduism because he doesn't like the apathy that he believes like certain ways of thinking about things will result in and promote. And it also frustrated me because this idea that it doesn't affect us, I think, is just, in my opinion, patently false. Like, Armin has spoken before about how this decades-old conflict over this area of land, the role it played in 9/11, what 9/11 caused for the past 20 years, how the refugee crises that it has since, caused, how that's destabilized the European Union, England left, and a lot of this comes back to the origin of different countries' stances on this fight over this little sliver of land. So these things do affect us, and they do affect our countries, even if we live like in a completely separate part of the world.
Yeah. Anyways, what are your questions about this conflict, Vikram?
The first one I wanted to know was, I guess I was going to tell you what I understand of the issue that's happening right now, and then you could, because I'm not very knowledgeable on this, but you could just correct if I get anything wrong, and you can add your own stuff. So the way I've been explained it, it's like, so it's not between Israel and Palestine as most people think. It's between the Hamas. I don't know if Hamas is a government or it's just a group, but the Hamas and the Israeli government that's led by Netanyahu. And basically, I read an article by Mehdi Hassan who said that the Israeli government in some ways created Hamas, but then Hamas kind of like became something they weren't predicting in a way. And then it's like, so in a way, it's like, if the Israeli government is like an abusive father, and like Hamas is like the rebellious teenager. And then, so whenever Hamas attacks like the father just beats them up way more. But every time that happens, Palestinians and Israelis suffer.
Well, okay, there's a lot there. what we say is that it's not like that people there's different ways of looking at this. We just think the most helpful way to look at this is not to see it as Palestine versus Israel, because that will implicate all Israelis and all Palestinians, right? And I think that we shouldn't hold all of the people in Israel and Palestine responsible for the crimes committed by a selected few, even if they voted for them. It's important to say even if they voted for them, because if you want to hold people responsible for voting for Hamas and Likud, that's a recipe for an endless cycle of revenge, right? I think like people should be forgiving of people, the emotional reaction people have to the experiences they had. I mean, it's hard. People have bad opinions. People have very bad opinions. As long as they are not directly responsible in the crime, I think we should be forgiving, or else there's no hope for any of this end, right? So a lot of Palestinians vote for Hamas. You shouldn't hold them, you shouldn't ever think them deserving of what Hamas itself is worth of punishment, but just because people voted for them. A lot of people voted for Netanyahu. I don't think you should ever hold them. You should ever think that they are deserving of any punishment or whatever. Whatever lack of security Israelis have because of Likud being in power, I don't think they deserve that just because they were wrong in their decision-making process, right? I think being wrong should not be considered a crime worthy of punishment, right? So I think like it's better to just hold Likud and Hamas responsible and just see this as a struggle, a united struggle. And on one side, you have Hamas and Likud that are working technically with each other. And so in practice, not practically supporting each other, right? I know that I'm not claiming that there's a conspiracy here where Likud is contacting Hamas behind the scenes, like, okay guys, you attack here, and then we'll respond, and we will stay in power, and you will, if we attack you and you attack us, this will help you against the Fatah party. Hamas, look, you're under threat by the Fatah party, and if you show yourself as the defender of the Palestinians, this will help you in our election. And if you attack us and we defend Israelis against you, this will help us in the Likud party in our election. So let's work with each other. Nothing like that, okay? But practically, what the effect is that's it. That's the result, without any communication or anything like that. So I think it really helps to see Hamas and Likud on one side against the Palestinians and Israelis on the other side. That's what I think is the most helpful way of looking at it.
But to answer Vikram's question, I'm not super well versed on this subject, but my understanding is that at some point, Hamas was given funding by the Israeli government to pitch them against the more secular Marxist organization that was gaining traction and power at the time. Which is again, guys, correct me because I'm not super familiar, but that's kind of an overview. Which is so funny because I can't, governments keep making this mistake over and over and over again, propping up these far right, really hardline religious organizations to basically fend off communists. And it creates this huge, deadly problem in the long run. But that's besides the point.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to, I guess, one of the points that Armin brought up. So it's something I think I saw both Armin bring up in the secular jihadist video with Ali Rizvi, and I also saw another video actually the other side. So Armin brought up how if you were to ask most Palestinians what they thought of Jews, they wouldn't have a favorable opinion of them. So it would be some form of anti-Jewish hatred. But there was also a video that went viral and sorry.
Well, I mean, the Palestinians that I talked to were atheists.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say, I think they had an anti-Israeli view,
not
an anti-Jewish view.
And I saw a video by they went in Israel and asked Israelis what they thought of with Palestinians, and the reaction was like similar but the other way. So they had like, I guess, anti-Palestinian views. And my question was that, so you said here like just because someone voted for like for Hamas or voted for the Israeli government, that doesn't mean we should like hate
Literally.
them or like be anti them. What would be a better solution? Like, what would be, I guess, a better way for like, especially for people who actually experience the effects of having voted for Hamas or for having voted for Netanyahu?
Well, it really depends. Here's the thing. I could tell you, like, if I'm a father, okay, and let's say, for example, ISIS kills my children because they were Shia, okay, I want these people maybe burned alive or something like that, okay, and at that point, all my views on enlightenment, all like justice, all get lawyers for these people, blah blah blah, might go out the window, right? Like everything that I have when it comes to like in a civilized society, we don't torture people. There needs to be, these people need to be able to be held, be able to defend themselves in the court of law, and even if they found guilty, they need to be treated in a humane way. These are my views, right? But I don't hold myself to that level to that standard if I am emotionally impacted by the same group of people. Okay, but so that's why the standards I have for governmental institutions or international bodies or organizations, that's the standard I have for them. I don't have that standard for people who have lost family. Well, I don't want them to, I could forgive them for having less than ideal standards. I just don't think like they should be running society, right? Like I think like I'm hoping that we live in a society. We live in a we live in a. I did the meme. We live in a. We live. I hope that we live in societies that me as an emotional person who has just lost a child wouldn't be in charge of the justice system or what standards should be in place, right? I should be removed from making those decisions once I'm impacted like that, right? The standards that societies I think should have should be based on not what is satisfies the greatest amount of thirst for revenge, but what actually ends up resulting in protecting the highest number of people from extra damage, right? That's what the standards should be, regardless of whether we're satisfied with our thirst for revenge is satisfied or not. But again, at the same time, I don't blame people for wanting more, because again, once you are hurt so much by something, it's hard to remain rational, right? So it's easy for me, somebody removed from the harm, to say something like that. Again, I admit that maybe if I was harmed by it, I wouldn't have these standards, right? But again, you want these standards to be introduced by somebody that is removed from the harm, because they will be more objectively be able to analyze what would result in the great least amount of harm, rather than my own personal desires for revenge, right? So that's why I'm saying, like, if you live in the Gaza Strip, you probably have lost somebody you care so much about, right? And again, even if you don't, if you are living in Israel and you are stressed because of the lack of security that is, again, it's not the same, okay? I'm not saying it's the same. One of them is like a lot worse than the other one. But at the same time, like, people are like, just look at our comment section, right? People are dumb, right? Even if they haven't been affected by such emotional turmoil, people are dumb, okay? But then think about the average person. Add a crazy dogmatic ideology like Islam, but that's not enough, right? Because we've seen that's not enough. We like look at Tunisia. People in Tunisia don't think like this, right? But add to that poverty, add to that unemployment, and lack of access to basic necessities like healthcare, education,
and all the
electricity.
infrastructure around you being demolished like every decade.
Yeah, I mean, I would be like shocked. Like we have ex-Muslims like in Gaza coming out and like, oh yeah, I'm in Gaza. I'm an ex-Muslim. I hate Hamas. I'm like, how did you survive the brain? Like that. It's not shocking to me that people are radicalized in Gaza. It's shocking to me that they're not radicalized in Gaza. Like when somebody comes from Gaza and be like, oh yeah, I left Islam. I think Hamas is like a radical like organization that is like criminal organization. That is like, what? How did you manage to like in that condition, in those environments? How did you manage to survive the brainwashing? Like so that is what surprised that is the unique situation, right? So I would have probably been radicalized if I like lived in Gaza. Like I mean I don't think I would have been immune to it. Like look, right? So
I mean,
again,
look at the conditions around you.
Right, yeah. So I mean that's why I wouldn't. Okay, here's the thing. I don't think like that. I don't mean to not hold people accountable for their bad views. Okay, but holding people accountable is different from thinking them deserving of such horrible living conditions, right? Having bad like just if you have a bad opinion, I could criticize you for having a bad opinion. I don't think you deserve poverty and misery and such level of, such horrible living conditions and lack of security and losing your loved ones, like living in such, you don't deserve that. People don't deserve it. Nobody deserves that, even if they have the most horrid ideas ever, right?
Speaking of,
yeah.
Alexa Loves Bella in the live chat is saying 50% of Gazans are under 18 and have internet access. I'm from Gaza and I'm an atheist.
Wow.
I'm so glad you can make it today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for joining, Alexa. That's yeah, and actually that's very interesting because when I was in Ramallah, we could see a clear difference in opinion between people above 30 and people under 30. Like teenagers, their opinions seem to become very different from people who were above 30 years old. So that was very interesting. Anyways, Vikram, sorry I talked for. Go on.
No worries. My next question was going to be about what happened in Palestine recently and how it's different from what happens before. Because by what I know, like every few years, like something like this happens. And I think this time, by my understanding, the Israeli government bombed a mosque during the period of Eid, which is what kind of like.
No, you mean tear gas?
Oh, tear gas. Sorry.
Yeah,
so I knew I should have looked better, but it was something. Yeah. And that kind of created an outrage over that because it was during a whole lot of people died or like were affected, and it was during a festive period. And I guess I wanted to know did I get anything wrong, or is there anything I'm missing in context?
I mean, so there's like a couple of things going on. So one of them would be the conflict that's going on in occupied East Jerusalem. So there are, I think, only around 6 properties that are affected by this current thing that started like hashtag save Sheikh Jarrah, where it's a property dispute that goes back potentially hundreds of years. I'm not going to get into it, but basically in the contemporary age, there were Palestinian families who had been living in these homes in East Jerusalem for generations, and they were being kicked out to be replaced by Israelis. Or sometimes, like, there was this video that went viral, and it's this guy from Brooklyn. Like, this Jewish guy from Brooklyn is moving to Israel, and he's replacing this family who's lived there for decades. Like, to me, you don't have to be super involved with the conflict and knowledgeable I think that's insane. This is like guy from Brooklyn just shows up and he's like, this is my house now. There's a lot more to it than that, but just seeing the video and anyways. So that was one aspect to it. Then there was the aspect of what's going on during Ramadan and Al-Aqsa Mosque. So Al-Aqsa Mosque is the third holiest site in Islam. And there were things leading up to it, but including like the police potentially intentionally like putting up barricades so that people can get there to properly worship and stuff. And this big fight broke out at the mosque, inside the mosque, and there were all these videos of worshipers getting tear gassed. Now there's like conflicting stories about how this started. And then there was this viral video of this tree on Al-Aqsa Mosque that got set on fire. And it was framed as like these far right Jewish Israelis like celebrating the burning of this mosque, whereas like that's not exactly what happened. So there were all these internal tensions, like kind of two separate topics, so what's happening at the mosque, what's happening in this neighborhood. And it's all starting to really come to a head, especially considering that they're police firing tear gas inside of this extremely sacred space, right? Like days before Eid. And in response to the Israeli police actions inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, Hamas started firing rockets at Israel. And then Israel's defense system, Iron Dome, has been able to protect Israel from like over or around 90% of the rockets fired by Hamas. But some still got through. And so this further justified Israel firing back. Palestine doesn't have any sort of defense system. They don't have bomb shelters like Israelis do. And I knew things were really starting to heat up when certain cities were targeted. So like Haifa, Tel Aviv, like these are huge centers, long-range missiles being fired towards these cities. And it was getting so serious. And on top of that, so as the states are firing missiles back and forth at each other, then also within Israel itself, all of these instances of massive communal violence started to happen. So, there's villages throughout Israel, and they're of people of mixed heritage and mixed ethnicity. And especially in these mixed cities, we saw some of the worst communal violence that people have said that they've seen in decades. Like Jewish and Arab getting lynched in the streets, like people getting pulled out of their cars and killed. A mosque got set on fire. A synagogue got set on fire. Like I can't even repeat the things that people are chanting in the streets, as they're mobs going around, Palestinian businesses being destroyed. And there are reports that the Israeli police allowed buses of far-right Jewish Israelis to come into these specific areas where there was this communal fighting, and reports that they either allowed this or actually participated in these outsider mobs coming in to stir up more violence as well. There's also been mass arrests of Palestinians. So there are already, I think, 1,500 reported arrests of Palestinian Israelis in the country, and there are hundreds more to be arrested in an action that was kind of going into effect like within the last couple of days, called like Law and Order, to kind of give you a sense. And a lot of people are very scared and critical of these mass arrests that are happening because they think that it's really just an excuse to just round up Palestinian activists. But one thing that analysts that I've been watching have said in terms of what you were asking about what's different this time is they're pointing to, one, the social media mobilization as one big thing that's different this time. Two, shifting attitudes in the United States among the populace, particularly in the Democratic Party and the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, is a big thing that's different this time. And third, what's different for Arab or Palestinian Israelis within Israel themselves. Like My understanding is that previously they were kind of seen as like separate, and they wouldn't necessarily mobilize when the stuff was going on in West Bank. They wouldn't necessarily mobilize when it was going on in Gaza. But this time we're seeing massive mobilization of Arab, Palestinian, Israeli youth within Israel, which is a lot of where some of these mass arrests are coming from.
One thing that was very either coincidental or maybe there's a reason why the tension happened right now, okay, depending on how strategic or conspiratorial you want to get, is that both Hamas and the Likud party, Netanyahu, were looking at upcoming elections, both of them right now. So Hamas needed the Palestinians to remember that they need Hamas as a vote for Hamas is a vote for revenge. A vote for Likud is a vote for security. Okay? So Netanyahu is looking like he might lose his power. The Israeli people needed to be reminded that they're under threat. For them to be reminded that they're under threat, some poking at Hamas was necessary for Hamas to do something so that Israel's government could step in and be the guardian of the Israeli people, just to remind them that vote right wing. People around the world, when they feel scared, when they want to vote for security, they vote right wing. So Likud needed this tension right now more than ever, right? So, and Hamas also needed this tension right now more than ever, because after many years of no election in Palestine, we finally had elections coming, and the elections are between Fatah and Hamas. Fatah, as bad as Fatah is, if there's any chance of any negotiations between Israel and Palestine, which is very unlikely, but if there is any, it will be with Fatah, right? So Israel's government keeps pretending like they want negotiations. They keep saying they want negotiations, but they also know that the world doesn't recognize Hamas as an official. Hamas is considered to be, again, I'm not going to see the word because of YouTube, but the terrorist state organization. So making sure there's always there's a conflict between Fatah and Hamas, and that Fatah doesn't take over, allows the Israeli government to constantly say, we want to negotiate with Palestinians, but they don't, because you could be very open about, yes, let's negotiate, but at the same time you keep emboldening Hamas so that the Hamas is always involved, so that you have the excuse not to negotiate, because negotiation is the only chance for eventually getting a two-state solution. But you could pretend like you're for a two-state solution while constantly giving Hamas the excuse to be a major player. And this divide between Palestinians and having Hamas as a major player constantly makes it so that as aggressively as you pretend like you are for negotiations, you never have to actually negotiate, right? So Hamas is such a beautiful gift to the Likud party, because as long as Hamas is involved, Likud doesn't ever have to actually finalize any negotiations, right? This is why, even though Netanyahu said that his role is to completely wipe out Hamas, and I tell you, I truly believe that the Israeli government, if they truly wanted to, they would be able to annihilate Hamas, right? Not through carpet bombings or anything like that, through planned assassinations of all its leaders, the same way they took out Fakhrizadeh. Like, if they really wanted to, they could have. And honestly, I don't think there would be that much international backlash against Israel's government for taking out Hamas leaders the way through assassinations rather than carpet bombings. I think that there wouldn't be that much of a backlash, but they don't want to do that because they need Hamas. They really do need Hamas. The same way Hamas needs the Israeli government. The Hamas, I truly believe that if Hamas leaders, if a genie showed up and like, hey, do you want me to like make Israel not exist with just a wish? I truly believe the Hamas leaders would be like, no, like, please, no, this is the entire reason why we're getting funding from Qatar, from Turkey, from Iran. Our entire existence is dependent on our relevancy, our power of authority, our source of funding. All of it depends on the existence of the state of Israel. So as much as they want to act like, yes, we're going to like end Israel and stuff, They don't want to end Israel. They need Israel. Hamas needs Israel, and the far right parties in Israel need Hamas.
Well, and Armin brings up a very good point, which I neglected to mention. So let's rewind like a month back. Okay, so a month back, Netanyahu, Israel went into its fourth election or fifth election. It's been crazy. So basically, Netanyahu is he's under fire for corruption charges. And whenever he is no longer prime minister, he is going to have to go to trial for a variety of corruption charges. And this is what he's afraid of. And based on the way that Israel's government works, they have to have coalition governments, and it's complicated. But basically, with the last election, Netanyahu was not able to secure a coalition that could stay in power. With this, so they had to go into another election. And so what happened was that there was starting to be a coalition that was forming that would be against Netanyahu, and he would be out of power. This is happening like literally a month ago. And I was following this a little bit. And then this is why it is I have a very hard time like defending Israel's I think it's Israel's war on Gaza personally. I'm so upset. Because I feel like it is so transparently a ploy for him to stay in power. Like, this man literally was willing to kill his own, or have put his own citizens at risk and kill Palestinians to stay in power so that he wouldn't face corruption charges in the immediate present. I firmly believe that that's what's going on. And oh my God. I think not only does Israel need Hamas, they need Palestine to be destabilized. They need Gaza to be hell on earth. Like, the actions of Israel over the past 2 weeks, 90% of it is next to indefensible to me. Maybe I've been getting biased analysis of this, but like blocking humanitarian aid, destroying the only COVID-19, oh shoot, I said it. The only the only virus testing station in Gaza, destroying the offices of the Associated Press and Al Jazeera, I don't know how they can justify this. They say, oh, this was a Hamas building, human shields. And where is the evidence that they have to bring forth that this is true? Now, I'm, skeptical on both sides, so I'm not going to say that it's impossible that that's true. But we also need to recognize that Hamas is the government of Gaza. So, like, there's going to be a lot of places and it's such a densely packed area of civilians, and Israel's this way too, where there's going to be government and civilians right next to each other, But particularly what blew my mind was just turning the Associated Press and Al Jazeera building into rubble. Like, when are they going to produce? But I know that they're not going to be held accountable. This is the thing. They're not going to be held accountable. So what is the evidence that there were people there? The Hamas there? Sorry, that was a rant. It just drives me crazy.
All right, but Vikram has more questions.
Yeah,
so let's get shorter answers so you could ask more questions.
No, it's fine. The next question was about, so it's more targeted towards Armin just because I heard Armin's take, so I'm just responding to that. But yeah, obviously, Susanna, you can always respond. The next question is about Armin. You said you're a Zionist, and that so because you want to defend the state of Israel so much, and the biggest enemy to Israel is Netanyahu or his government or whatever. My question would be like, isn't for someone to be a Zionist, does that not mean you support Israel as in the government of Israel?
Okay, so here's the thing. The current government of Israel, the current party in charge, I don't support that. And I'm not inherently against any form of Israeli government. Like, I would be in favor of a better Israeli government, right? And then it's not just Netanyahu. Netanyahu just now is the figurehead for all things far right in Israel. But overall, I'm against. I think the greatest enemy of Israel is all the far right parties in Israel. The biggest of them being Likud, and Netanyahu being the leader of it. But the whole ultra orthodox movement as a whole, and it's creeping into politics and the military and the school system, I think that is a major threat. And also the ethno-nationalism in Israel. Far right movements in Israel are a greater threat to Israel than Islam as an ideology, and Hamas and Hezbollah as political parties, and IRGC as a foreign influence. I think when it comes to foreign influence, Iran's influence on as a foreign influence, as a threat to Israel, is less of a threat than United States evangelicals and their financial support for ultra-Orthodox movements. So if you're looking for a great threat to Israel from outside of Israel, look at United States and the evangelicals and what they're doing to it, right? So I think those are the greatest threat to Israel. I'm not saying that Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran's influence is not a threat. I just think that they are incapable of becoming an existential threat to Israel, right? They don't have, not because of lack of intention, but because of lack of power, right? Like, maybe they would like to be greater threats to Israel, but they just aren't. Even if all three of them unite and attack Israel at the same time, most of the most powerful militaries in the world will come and defend Israel. They will not be able to, they will be a security threat for sure. They would be a nuance. They will have civilian deaths, a lot of civilian deaths, but Israel will survive all three of these. Israel will survive all three of these, right? But it is the religious and far right Jewish religious movements and the far right movements that could take out the Zionist project down from within, right? But the reason why I call myself a Zionist is because when I went to Israel, I realized that Zionism is a flexible term on what it could mean, right? And I met a lot of atheist, secular Zionists. I also, when you look at the history of Zionism, it wasn't religious. It wasn't at all religious at the beginning, right? It got mixed with religion because they chose the Holy Land as the eventual place where Israel, ended up being, and that mixed the religious elements and symbolism as a tool to get support for making that land the land for the Jewish people. But it didn't have to be. And the founders of it were not religious. And there are many Zionists right now that are not religious, and they don't make religious arguments for Israel. And in fact, atheist Zionists are some of the greatest critics against the settlements in the West Bank, because there is no good arguments for settlements in the West Bank. In fact, if anything, the settlements in the West Bank is putting Israel's security at jeopardy more than many other things, right? There's absolutely no good reason for the settlements in the West Bank. And the only serious arguments that are provided are religious arguments, which are obviously not good arguments, right? And that's why atheist Zionists completely recognize how nonsensical it is to continue the settlements in the West Bank, right? So if you care about Israel, you would stop the settlements. And I call myself Zionist because I defend Israel's existence, right? I do. And the reason why I think the far right parties and the religious movements in Israel are a threat to Israel is because if you look at all the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, then there's more Arabs than Jews, right? And right now there is the current situation, there's only three situations where that we could have when it comes to this entire land, like all of it, like Palestine, West Bank, Gaza Strip, and Israel as a whole. There's only three eventual outcomes, right? One of them is the status quo, right, where we have Palestinians living in a condition where the people who are supposed to be the governments are not the people who are making the decisions that actually affect their lives the most. Like, they are not electing the people that actually make the most important decisions for them. It's Israel's government that is deciding the food that they get, where they get to go, electricity, water, everything. Most of the decisions that are made for them is made by a government that the Palestinian people have not elected, right? So they are not being represented. They don't have freedom. They don't have freedom of mobility. They don't have freedom of choice. They don't have like, this is not, and they don't have an opportunity for finding meaning and jobs and anything. Like, this is not the right way to live, right? This is like obviously not the right way to live. This is what we have right now is people who are living under conditions that you could either consider stateless or apartheid, or a lower level of citizenship. People that don't have their rights. They don't have the rights and freedom. So this is the status quo. And I think like what we have is that the Likud party and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran, what they want is option number one, to stay like this forever. Okay, this is what they want. They want the status quo. However, the status quo it will one day end. It's impossible for you to just maintain this many people in an open prison forever. This will one day break apart. Okay, it's not gonna. I don't know. It's probably going to last for a very long time. Okay, I don't know when it's going to break apart, but one day this will break apart. So from the three options, what are the two other options? So once I'm done, Susanna, I'll go to you. Let me. I saw your hand up. Okay, the two other options are either a two-state solution or a one-state solution. Okay, the two-state solution was probably the best chance for peace. It's not an ideal, like, if in a perfect world, a one-state solution would be best. But given that we don't live in a perfect world, given all the racism, all the tribalism, and all the religious hatred that many of these people have for each other, in the current world, a two-state solution would have been, again, I hate a two-state solution because I don't like having nations that are based on that separates people based on religion and ethnicity. But given the conflict that exists, a two-state solution would have been the best chance for peace. However, the two-state solution has been made close to impossible. I would argue maybe impossible, but some people say don't say that. There's still a chance. Okay, fine. There's still a chance, but very, very little chance. There's almost close to a zero chance for the two-state solution because of the settlements. The settlements were designed to make the two-state solution impossible. I could go over the details about the politics of how the two-state solution was made impossible and how strategically the settlements in the West Bank was made precisely for making the two-state solution impossible. Okay, and the longer we go, the longer the two-state solution becomes more and more unlikely. It's already close to zero, but the farther we go, the closer we're going to get to zero. Right? That would leave the one-state solution by force. Right? Because the current status quo will not be able to maintain forever. At some point, this will break apart. The one-state solution might be forced on this land. Not because people are planning it, but because it will be forced on them. And the longer we wait until that one-way solution is forced on this land, the uglier it could be. Okay? Again, the one-state solution could have been so beautiful if it was done from the very beginning when the Jews came to this land. Okay? And I could tell you how it could have been, but because of the conflict and because of the hatred, the one-state solution is going to look very ugly. And the best we can do is to encourage Palestinians and Israelis not seeing each other as enemies, but seeing, their leaders as enemies, so that one-state solution becomes less and less ugly. But it could look as ugly as Rwanda. That's how ugly it could look. right? The one-state solution. But that's like the worst case scenario, right? But we're hoping it doesn't have to get there. But that will be forced. And again, when that happens, you have to understand that a one-state solution when Arabs and Jews live under one land and they all have the same say, that's a situation where we have more Arabs than Jews, and Israel will not remain, like we have majority Arabs, and the Arabs get to vote, right? So again, this didn't have to look ugly, because if this is like, if people are like, oh, like, well, if it's an Arab state, it's going to be ugly. Well, it didn't have to, because like we have Arabs in Tunisia, Arabs like in Lebanon, like people there, they are capable of wanting and desiring a secular state where people can live side by side with peace, right? Maybe the governments are bad in Lebanon, but let's say Tunisia, right? Or Algeria. Like, we know this is not about, there's nothing inherent in Arabs that makes them incapable of wanting to live side by side with Jews in a peaceful secular state. The reason why a majority Arab Israel country could look not as peaceful, and I'm scared for Jews in that situation, a one-state solution, is because of the conditions that Arabs in this land have been living in, and the hatred that they have in their heart, and maybe the desire for revenge that they have at some point. So again, the one-state solution could look very, very ugly, but I don't see like what else. So I think the only role we could have is the promotion of like the reduction of hatred between these groups of people. That's the only role we could have, and it's very little, but again, it's better than nothing. Yeah.
Well, so obviously, like, Armin is a Zionist. I don't know. I don't think I would consider myself a Zionist. I am sympathetic to the idea that somewhere in the world, Jewish people should have a place where they can go to be free of persecution. Like, I'm sympathetic to that idea in theory. But I'm not selling it having to be the specific piece of land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. But that's where we are now. And I'm, of course, hate how it's going down. Yeah, so I wouldn't call myself a Zionist. I would need to learn a lot more about different flavors of that opinion. But I think in terms of what Armin was saying, like, some analysts I was watching, they're like, we need to come to the reality that we actually already have one state, given the amount of control that Israel has over Gaza, given the control that it has over the West Bank, and given the lack of rights the Palestinians have within Israel. We're like, this already is one state. Israel controls everything. This already is one state. So I thought that was a very interesting opinion, because I hadn't heard it framed like that before. Like, yeah.
So here's the thing, Vikram. The eventually the Arabs will take over this land. There's no way out. There's just more of them, and you can't force them to live under, in such conditions. It's impossible. The one-state solution, like, it will eventually. There's more Arabs than Jews, and people think like that. And the reason why the Arabs will take over this land, and this whole thing will become a majority Arab state, is like, how could you? It's hard to imagine how you could avoid that, right? Because the two-state solution has been made impossible. What is the alternative? People are like, no, that's not going to happen. But if you think about it, what is the alternative? It's either the two-state solution or the status quo. The status quo is not going to stay forever, and the two-state solution has been made almost impossible by the settlements. So the one-state solution is inevitable, and the Arabs, there's more Arabs than Jews. So that thanks to far-right, racist, ethno-nationalist parties in Israel, this land will become a majority Arab, run by majority Arab people at some point. The only hope that I have is that when we get there, the desire for revenge is somehow disappears, which is very optimistic. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It could look very ugly, and I fear for Jewish people. this is the only reason why. This is why I defend. This is why I think Israel needs to be saved from anti-Arab racism, which is very common in Israel, by the way, right now, especially when events like this happens. Just look at it. Says don't highlight them. There's some extreme anti-Arab racists right now in our live chat, and I wish I could highlight them, but I think like if it shows up on our screen, YouTube might think like we are like promoting them. But if you want to see how disgusting some views are in Israel, like it's like in Palestine as well, there's extreme anti-Semitic views in among Arabs as well. But it's not just one thing. Like look at what Sahara is saying in the live chat. Like if you want to see extreme racism against Arabs, this is why I fear these people. And she has the flag of Israel as her profile, but these people are the greatest enemies of Israel. Anyways, Vikram.
Yeah, this question might come off a bit edgy, but I don't mean this to be edgy. Something I'm a bit confused by, but I'm not really sure by. It's that if sorry, one sec. Let's say so one thing I don't understand is that why do Jewish people around the world feel like, I guess, a sense of like not belongingness, but like a sense of unity very specifically with people in Israel? Because for me, like for example, like so I'm brown, but if let's say like brown people and like I don't know, just in some different country I've never been in were to suffer, I would feel bad for them because people are suffering, but I wouldn't feel like this sense of belongingness because we share the same skin color, right? So what about I guess why do a lot of Jewish people feel very, I guess, like this kind of very like strong sense of this need to defend Israel or the Israeli government or whatever?
I mean, this is not unique to any group of people. This is the sense of tribalism exists among everybody. I think that's the same thing among all people. The same reason why, I don't know, the Persians feel like, oh, Persian pride, or Arabs tribalism, or Jewish tribalism, or white tribalism. This is just same old tribalism you see everywhere else, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I think he's asking more specifically, though. Like, I think
but it is not specific. That's what I'm saying. That I'm saying it's not very different. Like, it's not unique to them. I see this everywhere. Like, how is this different from anyone else?
Yeah. I mean, I think of it kind of as like the dynamics of any like persecuted ethnic minority and their generalized global diaspora. Right? So like people from like the Tamil community, like there's a global diaspora of Tamils and they feel very strongly about, still what's happening back in Sri Lanka, even though they're in the United States, and I think like a lot of it has to do with the events of World War II. And I think what that does to a psyche of a people, and after the big H, as we call it, what happened in World War II, there was the sense of like, we need somewhere where we can go, where we can be safe. Because historically, persecution of Jews is one of the oldest persecuted ethnic groups in the world. This is a story that's thousands of years old. It's
even
not
now.
Something. Sorry?
Even now.
Oh, yeah. It's not something that's just new to the 20th century, Yeah. And so I think it was just like, we want a place where we can be safe. So I think a lot of the affinity for the Jewish people who are living in Israel, there is probably an aspect of it that is specific to Israel. But then there's probably an aspect of it that is just like, we want our people to be protected.
I think those are two separate things, because you don't have to be Jewish to support that, in my opinion. I think if you're supporting that because you're Jewish, that sense of tribalism is the same tribalism everywhere in the world, right? I think like given the conditions Jews have around the world, it made sense for them to want a country so that they could be protected. Given that everybody seemed to be hating, like making life difficult for them everywhere they lived in the world, it made, especially when at the time that countries were being made left and right, it was so reasonable, and it made absolute sense for the Jews to for there to be a case for making a country where Jewish people feel safe. It made absolute sense. It made so much sense, and I don't think that you need to be a Jew to see to be able to support that, right? You just need to be a humanist, right? So if you but the problem is with the way that it was made rather than the fact that it was made, because like think about from the very beginning when Jewish people came to Israel, right? At first it was like they were buying some lands, right? They were buying some lands. Mute your microphone so that so it's not back. And I think like it would have been so much more, the whole process would have been so much easier. The issue is not that they made a country. The issue is that they took Arab lands away from them by force. What are you doing with the camera? It's so distracting, Vikram. Okay, you're talking and you're
Sorry,
muted.
I was fixing something.
All right, so don't do that when I'm talking. Okay, so wait, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the problem with the whole situation is not that they wanted a country. The Jews at that time needed a country more than anyone else, in my opinion. Right? Maybe the Kurds would have been helpful if they got a country as well at that time. They asked for it, they didn't get it. They weren't as effective as the Jewish people when it comes to getting support for their cause, right? But it made sense for Jewish people to have a land where they are protected, where there's no threats against them. And honestly, like it's easy for us to say in hindsight, maybe that wasn't the best place, but at that time it looked like a good place. Jews and Arabs were living side by side in that place in peace. And when the Jews moved there, there didn't seem to be that much resistance against them. In fact, they were good for the economy at that place. So they were bringing money, they were bringing businesses, right? And they were buying land, and people were voluntarily selling it to them. That made sense. And I think that it could continue to look like that if they kept on coming. And the process of them coming is not like, oh, forcing Britain to make this a country for Jews and for Jews, and not the Arabs who are already living there, and not kicking Arabs out of their home. Like if you want to keep moving there, you could keep moving there and tell the Arab like, hey, Ottoman Empire has fallen apart. How about we turn this land into a country and we could live here together, and we coming here would be good for you. You could keep your homes. We will come here. We will buy land, and we will build homes on empty land. And as neighbors, you benefit from us because guess what? We're hungry and we need stuff, and you have farms and we buy stuff from you. Your businesses will boom, right? And we will build this land together. I don't know what you're going to call this land, but nobody needed to be kicked out of their home. This could have been a land where Jewish people would go to, and the Arabs living there would be the number one, the people who would benefit from that the most, right? They were like, this is great. All these rich Europeans are moving here, and they're bringing all their money and their business here. It would have been such a like the problem. It started with like when the Jews said like, no, this has to be a Jewish land, and the people who are already living here and they have homes, we're gonna get Britain to draw some borders, and the people who live on this other side of the border, because we have bought enough land to say that this place needs to be Jewish, you need to get out of here and move to the other side of this border by force. But like it doesn't make any sense. Like the Arabs are like, but I live here. I live here. Like, what are you doing? You're like, nope. Because no, this was Israel's Jewish land 3 to 2,000 years ago. Like, okay, but I live here. I have a home. Like, nope, 3,000, 2,000. This is our ancestors' lands, and this is our home now. And like, then like, but this is, and now they're arguing over like, oh, this is because Palestine was not technically a state, they're like, these people have no rights. Palestine was never a state, right? So like, oh, now it was a state from King David's time. So now, because it was a state, Israel was a state, technically was a state, and Palestine was a state, that means that we have a complete legal right. Nothing works like that. Nothing like you're bringing back, you're making legal arguments over things that happened more than thousands of years ago. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. This is my home. Who cares that Palestine was not a state? I own this home. You're kicking me out. I have a key, right? And this is my key to my house. They still have the keys. It made absolutely no sense. But here's the thing. Here's what but even though that was a mistake, the Jews that live in those homes right now shouldn't also be kicked out of their home now either, because they're not responsible for this forced eviction of their ancestors, right? I don't think it matters whether some wrong actions happened 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, or just one generation ago. It doesn't really matter, because the new generation now lives here, and you can't force them not to be homeless because of what their grandparents did. You have to deal with the situation that is right now. So no matter how wrong the original process was, the Israeli people that live in these homes right now should not be evicted. They're there now. You have to deal with that. They have to stay there, okay? And the Palestinian people who are there now should also stay there, right? I mean, if all the people who are arguing like, oh no, the Israelis have to leave because the original process was not done right, if you want to make that argument, then all non-natives should leave Canada and United States based on that argument. If you want to make that argument, then all non-natives of United States and Canada have to leave. If you want to make that argument, makes absolutely no sense. Anyways, go on.
Yeah, I had like another question. It's not in the ones I sent you, but I saw a video on TikTok about this girl. I think she was like some super pro-Israel girl, and she said that like to all the feminists in like the West, if you really consider yourself to be feminist, like in Palestine right now, like, you know, she brought up a bunch of like systemic oppression that women are facing there, and then she brought up how can you claim to be feminist and support a country that treats women this way? And I saw someone respond to it, but I wanted to know how you two would.
Easy. Okay, so here's the deal. In terms of the civil rights that are available to the citizens that are afforded full rights under the state, important asterisks, Israel has better civil rights. And a lot of that has to, well, actually, I'm not going to attribute it to anything. It's true. Like, we were covering a story a few weeks ago about how they were trying to bring back the male guardianship in Gaza. And then there was outcry, and then they're like, oh, we're going to make adjustments to it. It's still not clear to me what those adjustments to male guardianship is going to be, right? So in terms of attitudes, like, Pew Research demonstrates that people living, particularly in Gaza, have some of the most, we would consider like extreme views in the Islamic world, just in terms of, and I'm going to have to say this many times because people are going to try to paint what I'm saying incorrectly. I'm not attributing this to all people. I am not attributing this to all people. I'm talking about percentages, okay? So there is a high percentage of people who support like stoning for adultery, executing gay people, like the most severe of Sharia and Hudud punishments, right? They have some of the highest percentages of support for these ideas in the entire Islamic world. So it's true that women in Israel are afforded better rights. That doesn't mean that we should crap on all Palestinians and shouldn't defend their human rights. Like, you having the best, most liberal opinions on things, or opinions that agree with me, like, is not how we should defend human rights. Like, you get human rights even if you're a criminal, or you should. Those should be observed, right? And I'm not comparing Palestinians to criminals. I'm just giving an example. So we should want those rights for all people within this area of land, right? And just because some of these people hold really horrible opinions, in my opinion, that doesn't mean that their death, their persecution, the destruction of all of their infrastructure, just the iron hold that is on their neck for like decades, the humanitarian crises that continue to unfold for decades, like this status quo is fucking horrible, right? That shouldn't be allowed to continue just because people have bad opinions. That's not how human rights work. So yeah, I support like more of the civil rights of Israel, but that doesn't mean that these people don't deserve to live. Does that make sense?
What was the original question? I forgot.
So I saw a video on TikTok by this girl. She was like super pro-Israel, and she said that to you, like the Westerners who claim to be feminist, if you claim to be feminist so much, why are you supporting Palestine or like Palestinians, a country like where the people mistreat the women so much? If you really like support feminism, you should be siding with Israel.
Well, the binary nature of this is like so stupid, in my opinion. It's not, again, it's not Palestine versus Israel. I mean, if you're a feminist, then I'm supposed you're supposed to be for the Palestinian woman, maybe against Hamas, which is anti-women's rights. So like, it's not like, oh, you're for women's rights, so you're supposed to be for Israel and against Palestine. No, if you're for women's rights, you're against Hamas and Hezbollah. For the Palestinian woman, you want to liberate Palestinian women from religious dogma, from Hamas, from Hezbollah, from even Fatah, right? When it comes to women's rights. And you will also want to liberate Israeli women. Again, I know it's not as bad, definitely not as bad for Israeli women than it is for Arab women in Palestine, right? But it's still bad compared to Canada and United States. I mean, if your standard is Islamic countries, then sure, Israel's women's rights record looks great. But if your standard is sanity, then no, women's rights are violated in Israel, and you would not. Again, the threat to women's rights in Israel is not Hamas. The threat to women's rights in Israel is far-right parties and the influence of religion in politics. And you would want to liberate women in Israel from really ultra-Orthodox Jewish influence as well. I mean, actually, I've been to ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods in Tel Aviv. I can say, I know this is going to be controversial, the woman in ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods in Tel Aviv, the woman in Tel Aviv, which is one of the most secular cities in the world, the women in ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods in Tel Aviv live in way worse conditions than women in Tehran. Okay? They have the rights that the community, the ultra-Orthodox community forces on women in Tel Aviv is worse, far worse than the average woman in Tehran, Iran. So yeah, if you're for women's rights, you need to save women in Israel as well against ultra-Orthodox views. So yeah, again, so this idea of like Palestine versus Israel, if you're a feminist, you would be on Israel's. Like, again, it's not Palestine versus Israel. It's Palestinian people and Israeli people versus dogmatic and religious and ethno-nationalist views.
And one thing that I didn't like, I think just because you speak for like how Palestinian people are being mistreated, that doesn't mean that you agree with them. So this idea like, oh, if you're a feminist, you support Israel, like, I can say that how these people are being treated is wrong. I don't have to agree with all their views, like that doesn't mean that I'm not a feminist. Like, I just don't like how they're being treated.
We do need to, okay, so Alexa, who is an ex-Muslim in Gaza, saying, do you support Israelis' occupation because others persecute Jews? Have the Palestinians historically ever persecuted Jews? Nakba wasn't buying lands. They massacred and exiled and killed. Okay, Alexa, I said originally it started if you listen to what I said, I said it turned ugly. Like I think you commented this halfway through me finishing my point, because I saw that originally when it started as buying lands, but as soon as they gained momentum, it turned into something else, right? But also, I have a problem with the way you're framing these things, because you're talking about Jewish people as a collective, right? So I don't want to hold them all accountable for actions of some people at certain times, right? I don't want to and I think that that original process was done in a very ugly way, but I'm not going to hold people today who live in Israel responsible for the actions done. Again, the sins of the father should not be the sins of the son. This is a very biblical viewpoint of holding people accountable today for whatever the Jews did back then. Again, some Jews did back then. Yeah. I hope that answers.
Yeah, and I have like a final question, and yeah, that will be my last one for tonight.
Okay.
My question is, so I saw this. There was this kind of, you kind of brought it up when you brought up apostate prophet at the beginning. Yeah, Susanna left. Is she coming back, or like?
Yeah, she's coming back. She just needed, I think, a pee break or something.
Okay, nice. So my question would be, so when we look on, like right now online, there has been a lot of posts made when people in the West, where there's like America, Canada, Europe, and all that, and the discussion is about whether those posts being made, are they having an impact on the conflict in terms of helping it like find solutions and stuff, or is it just like virtue signaling?
Wait, can you rephrase that question? Can you explain that again? What do you
mean? Online, if you look on like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and all that, a lot of people have been like raising their support for the Palestinians and all that.
Oh yeah.
And the question is, are those having an impact in the world? Are they helping Palestinians? Or is it just virtue signaling?
Both. A lot of them are virtue signaling, but they're also having an impact. Just because a lot of them is virtue signaling, that doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact. Virtue signaling changes opinions and also changes how people vote and changes how politicians act. Politicians act the way when people signal to their politicians what they care about. Politicians, because they want to remain relevant, they adjust their tunes. I mean, the fact that the Democrats in the United States, so again, this goes against what Apostate Prophet was saying, that this doesn't matter at all. Like, even if it is virtue signaling, even if it's all like people who don't actually care about Palestinians and people who don't care about Israelis, they're just saying, I'm pro-Palestine because they're trying to signal that I belong to this tribe. Hey, please, 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 I am a member of your tribe. Accept me, acknowledge me. And people who say I'm pro-Israelis, they're doing the same. A lot of them are doing basically the same thing, right? It is a lot of it. Again, I can't individually judge who's doing virtue signaling because I can't read people's minds. A lot of them are genuine. Some people genuinely care. Okay, believe it or not, some people actually care, right? But yeah, a lot of it is probably virtue signaling. But again, that still has a major impact. People like Apostle Prophet said, like, oh, it has no impact. Really? Look at what's happening in the United States. Look at how opinions, the fact that opinions on the ground has changed in the United States. Look at the way that for the first time in the United States, the Democrats are able to come and say, like, hey, maybe we should, in Congress. This was unheard of. This shows a major shift. And if you think this has no influence, you're extremely naive. You're extremely naive. I'm not saying it has absolute influence. Obviously, Israel is becoming more and more independent from the United States, but it's so naive to think it has no influence. You have Congress people in the United States coming in and saying that Israel's aid should be conditional. This used to be political suicide. Even
taking massive action to try to block an arms sale.
Yes,
it's not going to work right now.
It's not going to work. Right, because Israel still has a lot of lobbying power, but the fact that that's even suggested, and you get to keep your political career while actively suggesting that, it shows that things are changing, right? And it has an influence. And you think Israel's government will try to adjust accordingly so that it becomes more immune from, politics from European countries and United States by, I don't know, like getting closer to countries like, I don't know, China, Saudi Arabia, or whatever like that. But again, to assume that Israel's government does not care about its international image is absolutely naive, and they do care, and it does have an influence, right? The fact that Israel, like, I think like the human rights violations by Israel would have been, like, people look at like some human rights violations by the IDF, they be like, oh, they don't care. Look, they don't care. The international pressure does not work. I think if you had removed the international pressure, it would have looked a lot uglier. If you had eliminated the international pressure from Israel, like, it would have become, so it does have an influence. If it has an influence on countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, do you think it has no influence on a country like Israel? Obviously it does.
Yeah, I haven't really kept up with the news recently, but last time I checked, there was there was a ceasefire proposal that was made by the UN, and the US voted against it 3 times. I don't know if they ended up agreeing on it, but that was one of the criticisms that Biden had, was that publicly he voiced out his opinion that there needed to be a ceasefire, but then he refused the proposals made by the UN. So that's why I kind of asked whether it was virtue signaling, because to a lot of people it feels like all you're doing is getting attention on like social media and all, but do you really think that Netanyahu is like getting scared because Jane in Toronto is like posting a thing on her story criticizing him?
Yeah, actually he is scared, because he's noticing the effect that, like, Jane in Toronto is not just one person. Jane in Toronto is part of a major worldwide trend, which is going to maybe make it difficult for somebody like Trudeau to do trades or be more supportive of Israel's government. Or, I don't know, Bob in New York has an effect on the fact that politicians in the United States are becoming more aggressive with their tones on. Again, it's still in support. It's still like very small movements, but you could clearly see it as, small. Again, this is like people who don't. If you want to dismiss that, all form of activism should be completely dismissed, right? Nobody should say anything about anything ever again, because if you could focus on one person's activism, then it looks like completely insignificant. Do you know what I mean? Like, why come out and support anything? Why come out and support, I don't know, less waste in so called river in that place? Or why fight against animal abuse in so-called country? Why fight against? Because then you're just Vikram. Like no one should do activism, because if you focus on that one person, then it looks incredibly insignificant. But it's not just that one person. That person is adding their small voice to a lot of other small people's voices, where overall will make a big difference. Like, what a dumb response. Like, well, like, then you hear that from somebody who has changed their profile picture to Israel. Like, oh, okay, well, you're also just one person, you dumb fuck. What are you talking about? Like, why are you even talking then right now? You're just one fucking person. Why are you defending Israel then? You're also, do you not like see that you're also just one person? Like, it's just, I don't know. Like, do I even need to respond to this? Like, I don't know. It's too dumb. I do want to respond to Alexa, because this is like, I like responding to ex-Muslims from Gaza. I don't know why. See, this, I know why. I'm also being tribal. I'm having like this emotional sense of
affinity for
Yeah,
ex-Muslim.
to my fellow ex-Muslims, especially when they come out of some such hostile places. I would like, where's my fellow ex-Muslim in hostile territory? I need to respond. Yeah, see, I'm not immune from tribalism. I want to respond to Alexa. Alexa is saying, you seem to hold Palestinians to the actions of all Arabs and Muslims when you say you worry about Jews. No, not necessarily, because, well, I mean, not at all, because, like, let me give you an example, right? So, for example, I say Pakistan is, as a country, is an extremely dangerous place for apostates or blasphemers or secularists or atheists. I say Pakistan is like, for example, I'm using Pakistan as an example. I say that's a place very dangerous for these people. Even though the majority of people in Pakistan are not violent, right? But the minority that are that minority is large enough for it to be significant. In fact, that minority is so active and so militant that their say and what they want trumps what the majority want, like because of the level, how much sacrifice they're willing to make for their views, right? So it's not necessarily like I don't hold all Palestinians responsible for the actions of some for Hamas and all that, right? In fact, we covered here on Atheist Republic, we just recently covered like this woman in Gaza who was a reporter who's not a non-hijabi, remember, Suze? That she was being harassed.
She was assaulted because she wasn't wearing hijab, and now she's like, I have to leave Gaza. I can't be a reporter here anymore.
I don't understand how am I holding all Arabs responsible? I think like the numbers are bad enough for me to worry about the Jews. It doesn't have to be all Arabs in Gaza that would be dangerous, or all Arabs in the West Bank that would be dangerous. It's enough. If you look at the numbers and the views coming out of Gaza, is enough of them for it to be scary, but definitely not all.
Like the vast majority.
Yeah, but even but let me actually say this. Even the vast majority of people who have such horrid anti-Semitic views, none of them will ever a lot of them will not actually do anything about it, but enough of them will that it's a threat. Even among the people who have the worst views, most of them will not actually take action on it. But it is a big enough minority for it to be scary. It doesn't take much of that high of a percentage of people for you to create chaos. Chaos doesn't take 50% of the population. Chaos doesn't take 40%, 30%, 20%, not even 10%. Chaos takes 5%. 5% is actually a lot. Chaos could take 2% of the population that are absolutely ready to pay the cost. You could cause absolute chaos with a dedicated 2%. But go on, you were saying.
Oh, I mean, I actually think that like you're one of the best at distinguishing like not all, hashtag not all. But I saw a previous comment also from Alexa saying that I'm going to assume it's a girl, that she didn't appreciate you saying Arabs instead of Palestinians because, and I think she seemed to think that you were conflating Arabs with Muslims and didn't like how you were calling Palestinians just Arabs because that also includes like Christian Arabs or Palestinian Christians and Palestinian Jews,
Right. No, the reason why I said Arabs instead of Palestinians is because I was referring to I'm referring to a time. That's why I also clarified that this is not about them being Arabs, because this is certain Arabs that have lived under certain conditions that you would not have similar level of radicalism coming out of Arabs living under conditions, for example, in Tunisia. All right. So this is not the Arabs that have become radicalized, the Arabs who live between the Jordan River and Mediterranean Sea. A lot of the radicalization process is due to not just religious dogma, because if it was religious dogma, you would see this in every Islamic country. You don't, right? The views that we see coming out of this Arabs from this area, you don't see it coming at like the same level out of Arabs in other areas, right? So it's not just, I'm not dismissing religious dogma as a role. It's a mix of religious dogma and also the socioeconomical living conditions and the lack of security and lack of prosperity and lack of hope and all of that together, right? The reason why I'm referring to them as Arabs is because I'm combining not just like all the Arabs living in that area, including Israeli Arabs and I'm talking about a time where we have a one-state solution. So I was specifically talking about what will happen when we have a one-state solution. And I don't know if at that time referring to this place as Palestine or Israel makes sense. I don't know what, like, I honestly don't know what to call this entire area at that point. So I'm just trying to, like, not, add confusion between saying Palestinians or Jews. I'm talking about I'm talking about not just the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis. I'm talking about the entire relationship, that the way Arabs see the Jews in this land and the way Jews see the Arabs, even regardless of their religion. And again, this is not something inherent in their race. This is because other people have used their ethnicity as a way for, as a way to keep themselves in power and relevant by making them hate each other. So the reason why I'm referring to their race is because racial hatred has been used as a weapon to put these people against each other. And when I say that the racial hatred has been used as a way to put these people against each other, it's not just the Palestinians. When Netanyahu comes and says, hey, the Arabs are going to vote, this is the threat against Israel, he's using hatred towards Arabs who are Israelis as a weapon as well. This is racism against Arabs who are not Palestinians. I mean, some of them call themselves Palestinians, but technically they're not Palestinians. These are Israeli Arabs. So the struggle, the hatred that is being, that he's pouring the gas on, is to all Arabs, not just Palestinians Arabs. So when I say, like, oh, I fear for the Jews, I also fear for the Arabs. But I fear for the Jews about the hatred the Arabs have for the Jews in that condition, not because Arabs inherently hate Jews, but because they have been, Arabs in that area have been used and have been made to hate Jews to keep Hamas and Likud relevant, right? So there's nothing that I'm suggesting that is inherent about being an Arab, right? Honestly, if I lived in those conditions, I could be a radical right now, okay? Again, it has nothing to do with these people's ethnicities. Does that make sense, Alex? Let me know. Vikram, did that make sense?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, but I'm gonna see if Alexa has a issue with what I'm saying.
Yeah, maybe we could answer the people's question.
Yes.
Question,
Or you don't have any more questions?
I have I had one more. It was about have you seen what Vosh said about Israel some time back? I can't repeat it because
No, don't repeat it.
Don't repeat
No.
it. What got him banned off of Twitch?
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's back on Twitch now. But I don't want to repeat it. Yeah, no, that was wrong.
I mean, I can't remember. I mean, he said a lot of, like, wild stuff. It's kind of ironic in light of the Abraham Accords. I find it very ironic in light of the Abraham Accords. Like,
no, yeah, but okay, that was a time ago, but let me criticize one thing Wash is saying now, okay? Here's the thing. I agree that the radicalism in Gaza can be explained, but not excused. Okay? And when forgiving people for having bad opinions does not mean excusing them and not holding them accountable, right? I can if you have bad opinions, I can hold you accountable for having bad opinions, but not punish you for having bad opinions, but call you out for having bad opinions. If you have bad opinions that lead into bad actions, I could still explain how you became radicalized to do such bad things, but my explanation does not mean that I'm excusing your bad behavior and that I'm in favor of not holding you accountable, right? I do think some people go as far as excusing Hamas, and that's horrible. Okay, I understand that Hamas was created in conditions that Israeli government made possible and someone outright supported, right? Outright funded the proto-Islamic groups that eventually became Hamas. I know that, and I know Hamas was a benefit to far-right parties in Israel and all that. I know all of that, right? But when Vosh comes and says, like, given these conditions, can you really blame Hamas? I'm like, yeah, I can. That's what he said. The Varsh said, like, I honestly, with all these conditions, with all the things that Israel's government is doing, and blah blah blah, can you guys really blame them?
Didn't you agree with him earlier?
I will blame Hamas. I
really hope he's not familiar with like their ideology, like, because if he is, that's unexcusable.
No, me recognizing. Okay, here's the thing. I think people don't understand this. Me recognizing that if I lived in those conditions, maybe I would have been radicalized and maybe I would have done some horrid things. Doesn't mean that now. That doesn't mean that I don't blame. I blame me, and even if I blame that version of me. Okay, that version of me should be like, arrested, and if not possible in the battle, if you manage to eliminate that version of me, I won't blame you. Like that person, that's me. Yes, again, explaining things and excusing things are two separate things. I can see why some people will become like that, but at the same time, I condemn it. Right? You don't go as far as becoming a propaganda arm for Hamas just because Israel has created the condition that made it possible, right? Because if you can excuse that, then you could excuse all radical movements. You could excuse ISIS. You could excuse far-right radical nationalist white groups in the United States. You could excuse the Yazidis. Again, I'm not saying who they are from World War II. You could excuse everything if you think like that. You can excuse Thanos. Go
on. We have one comment from Retard Skeptic, which I think speaks to your point, Armin, saying, I think it might be fair to say, quote, it makes sense that these types of groups crop up, but that's not to excuse them. They're still wrong, even if we understand how they come about. Exactly. But Alexa has some comments.
Before you remove that, I want to say, like, there's two groups of people, okay? People on any side, it doesn't matter how, like, everywhere, okay? People who support radical groups that have done crimes, right? I hold them accountable by just pointing out how wrong they are. And I don't think they deserve any other punishment other than being called out, right? Like, let's say somebody supports Hamas. Somebody supports far-right parties in Israel. Somebody supports far-right parties in, I don't know, some European countries, okay? These people are wrong, and they should be called out and held accountable, but held accountable only to the point that we call them out and point out how wrong they are. Then there's a group of people who have wrong opinions, very bad opinions, and they take actions based on their wrong opinions and cause a lot of damage and harm. Like the actual members of Hamas, not people who vote for Hamas, but actual members of Hamas, okay? These people are beyond wrong, okay? These people, their punishment means that they should be arrested, and if not, and if they're in the fight, if they're in the battle, then I'm not going to say it, but they need to be removed from the equation, right? Like people who are actually causing harm, so I'm like removing Fakhrizadeh makes sense to me. Okay. Thank you, Mossad, for removing Fakhrizadeh. I officially thank Mossad for that. Right. But these are completely two group of people, and people mix them. Like people, people who voted Hamas, they deserve everything that is coming to them. This is completely like there's a giant gap between these group of people, right? Like you can't mix these two people together. Anyways, you wanted to bring Alexa's comment?
Yeah, so Alexa has a couple of comments, and they basically come down to criticizing you regarding generalizing between Palestinians and Arabs.
I'm not generalizing.
Let's go with her comments in response to what you said last time. Palestinians with Israeli citizenship since 1948 living in Israel have not done anything anti-Semitic, so what you're saying is literally unproven. Tunisia has made hijab illegal until the Arab Spring. Stop doing that. It's wrong. I have nothing in common with Saudi or Egyptian in terms of how I am.
Wow. So you're generalizing, Alexa. So it's amazing. No, let's go one by one. Please don't highlight two of them at the same time. Go back. This is so amazing. Go back. Look at this. Palestinians with Israeli citizenship since 1948 living in Israel have not done anything anti-Semitic. So what you say is literally unproven. when did I say, first of all, when did I even comment on whether or not they have done anything anti-Semitic? Okay, I've never commented on that at all. And second of all, I'm not talking. You're talking about entire group of people. You're passing about entire group of passing judgment on entire group of people. Okay, I'm not passing judgment on an entire group of people. I use this as an example to say that hatred towards Arabs was done whether they were Israeli or not. I was talking about like you're talking about Arab Israelis, and you're making it seem like I was suggesting that they're a threat. I was talking about the crimes that was done to them. I was talking about the fact that the hatred towards Arabs that was being used was also against Arabs who live in Israel who have Israeli citizenship. So I don't even know what you're referring to. What has this got to do with anything I'm saying, right? The fact that Netanyahu and the far right parties are racist against Arabs in Israel as well, to me shows that for them, this is an Jew versus Arab conflict overall, not just a Palestinian versus Israeli conflict. All right, what was the other one?
1 second. So it's Tunisia has made hijab illegal until the Arab Spring. Stop doing that. It's wrong. I have nothing in common with a Saudi or Egyptian in terms of how I am. And then the second one, like
no, stop. Tunisia has made hijab illegal, so that proves my point that Tunisians are living under completely different conditions than Arabs in. So this completely proves my point. I don't understand. This contradicts it. This goes in my favor. Because I was saying that Arabs in Tunisia and also this and nothing common with Saudi and Egyptians in terms of how I am. That proves my point because I was saying that Arabs living in these other countries have completely different living conditions than the Arabs living in Palestine. So the fact that they're Arab doesn't make them similar at all. What their living conditions that they're going through makes them different. So that proves that the fact that there's nothing inherent about being Arab, I don't understand. Everything you're saying supports what I'm saying. What being an Arab doesn't make you any way, one way or another. Ethnicity does not affect how your views are. You're living. My point is that the fact that the Arabs in Palestine have different view than Arabs are in other places shows that their ethnicity is not a major factor. The socioeconomic and living conditions, that is the driving factor. This proves my point. What are you saying? The only reason why being an Arab becomes significant because being your race is very insignificant. My race, your race, Vikram's race, Susanna's race is very insignificant. The only way it becomes significant is because of the people who are using your race as a target to make it significant. The racists make your race significant, not because your race is inherently significant at all. I don't think there's any significance to race. So I think Alexa just doesn't understand what I'm saying. What's the next point?
So it kind of comes off the last point. Calling me an Arab is like calling a German person white. United Arab Emirates and Qatar have peace deals with Israel. So does Egypt.
That's my point.
Those are Arab states with very different opinions.
So here's the thing: being an Arab or being a Jew or being Persian or Scandinavian, none of this is significant until racists come use your race as a target and make it significant. Okay, so these are not significant by choice. When you become a target because of your ethnicity, then it becomes significant because then people who want to protect you need to identify what is this target on your back? Why are people making it a target, right? So you can't ignore the fact that racists are making this a target. This goes to my point. The Arabs in all these places have nothing in common. They are, but racism, tribalism, and other elements make these people connected in a way that they shouldn't be connected, in my opinion. There are better ways to be connected. We could be connected through our humanity, okay? But the fact is that the Arab from UAE, the Arab from Qatar, and the Arab from Egypt, and the Arab from Palestine to an anti-Arab racist, he or she is racist against all of them. So you might think that they have nothing in common, but that racist hates them all. So again, I don't, just because I think that these people are a target of anti-Arab racism by all anti-Arab racists, that doesn't mean that I'm in favor of making race a big deal. But you cannot not ignore the fact that race is a big deal to the people who are making people's race a target, right? Like this is what I say. Like, imagine like you're living in Germany during World War II, and somebody comes knocking at your door, right? And you open the door, and the guy says, "I'm a Jew. They're looking for me. Please hide me." Imagine if your response was like, "Who cares that you're a Jew? Why is your race such a big deal? Why are you making your race such a big deal? Race is not such a big deal." Well, he didn't make it a big deal. The other people who are attacking him made a big deal. It became a target on his back. So if you provide protection for him, it's not because you think that because of his race, he is inherently deserving of your attention. It's other people who have made his race a target, made it so that if you want to protect him, now you have to take his race into account. If you're like, let's say in Daesh held territory, right? And your helicopter has one more room for one more person. There's your full capacity, and you're about to take off, and there's two people coming out of the helicopter, but you can only save one of them. You could only get one of them in a helicopter, right? And if you leave, you don't know what's going to happen to them, right? This is ISIS territory. One of them is a Sunni man. The other one is a Yazidi woman. Are you going to be like, I'm just going to flip a coin because I don't play identity politics? No, you're going to pick the Yazidi woman. You're going to pick the Yazidi woman. Not because the Yazidi woman is like, you think being Yazidi or being a woman somehow makes a certain person should have extra privileges. It's because this woman, because of her identity, is at a greater risk. So they have forced you to take this person's racial and genetical identity into account. It's not your choice. They made it. So you can't ignore that. Anyways, Vikram, do you want to say anything?
Not really. It just feels like, I feel like Alexa may have some, I guess, personal things going on with regards to where she is at and all that. And you saying those things might have come off in a way that, I guess, kind of hurt her, like, emotionally. But that's all I can really say. I agree with you.
Okay, so Alexa is saying, you keep saying you're afraid of what will happen to Jews once the Arabs take over, and I'm telling you, Arabs with Israeli citizenship don't hurt no more. Okay, I don't know, Alexa. Jewish people right now in the United States are not safe. Okay, Jewish people in France, they're not safe. Okay, I completely agree with you that the Arabs who with Israeli citizenship, they are extremely less radical, if at all, probably not at all. Okay, no, I mean a fraction, maybe a small fraction compared to the people living in Gaza. Okay, obviously, I don't think I said anything that suggests that the Arabs who are with Israeli citizenship are as like they have the same views and same attitudes as Arabs living in Gaza. Even the Arabs living in West Bank, forget, like, even consider the Arabs in Gaza to be extra radical, right? Like when I was in West Bank, the people living there were telling me, Armin, don't go to Gaza, that's not safe, right? So, and compared to, obviously, like, there are a lot of Arabs in Israel who support the Likud party, who even vote for the Likud party. There are Arabs in Israel who are proud to serve in Israel's military. Okay? I've seen that and I know that. But I don't think you could outright claim that I think you're generalizing a little bit too much when you're saying that there's nobody in no Arab in, like, I'm not willing to
Well,
say
that it's also provably untrue. Then the last week there were the communal violence.
Yeah. Actually, good
There
point.
there were Jews and Arabs who were lynched in the streets.
There were Arabs with Israeli citizenship that were attacking Jews. So I don't know what you're talking about, Alexa. They are much less radical, but they are there. Jewish people are under threat everywhere. So even in the United States, even in Canada.
Most hate crimes in the United States are against Jewish people.
Yeah, most hate crimes globally are against Jewish people. So I'm not that optimistic about, again, I agree with you that they are a lot, like the way you're making it seem like that the Arabs in Israel, their anti-Semitic views is less than Canada, the way that and I don't think that's true, right? So I think there are, even though it's much less than people in Gaza and the West Bank, I still think there is some hatred there, and enough hatred for some of them to be in support of some very vile actions. Again, not all, maybe not even most, probably not. No, not maybe, definitely not most, but enough for it to be scary. Okay.
I wonder if I'm trying to be like charitable to Alexa. I wonder if what they are saying is that you seem to be making like a whataboutism when like the issue right now is about Palestinian suffering, and you're bringing up like the suffering of Jews.
Say that again.
I see your point.
I wonder if that's what they are saying, that you're making like a whataboutism, like you're saying you're bringing up the issues that Jews are facing, as in, well, right now we are talking specifically about issues that Palestinians are facing. So I'm guessing that's what they might be saying.
No, because no, I was responding to threats to Israel, right? So that was in context of responding to that question, because I don't ignore the human rights violations of Palestine. I talk about it all the time, right? Whataboutism is done when you're trying to bring attention to something to ignore some other thing, but I don't ignore that other thing. I talk about the other thing. Alexa is saying, I get you. I think clarifying that the issue is Israel hates Arabs generally and manifests this towards, again, I don't talk about Israel hating Arabs, right? Because again, as I don't talk about Israelis as a collective either. I'm talking about specific far right movements in Israel, and the way that they make the Arab identity an issue. Okay, guys, the way there are some political parties, there are people in Israel's politics that hold seat in the parliament. I can never pronounce it because there's a K and an N. Knesset, I'm saying it right. In the Knesset, right? I did it right. Yes, there are people holding seats there that they say things about Arabs that the most vile far right people in the United States would shock them even. And these people hold seat in Israel's parliament, okay? And like, so don't tell me like, oh, don't talk about Arab identity as if it's not an issue. How could it not be an issue where these people in Israel's politics, their entire mission is to keep Israel's Jewish identity intact and save it from Arab identity? How could you not talk about Arab and Arab identity when these people have made this a target? And again, if that is Israeli politics right now, that is the greatest threat to Israel. Israel could have been a beautiful, beautiful country that leads. Israel could have been a country that was the champion of human rights by first cleaning everything at home, right? Equal rights to everybody, ethnicity and religion and anything, not an issue, but also being a country that was founded upon providing protection for the most persecuted people in the world. And because of the spirit of its foundation, becoming the champion of human rights all across the world. Israel could have been the reason why we create Holocaust museums around the world because we want to say never again. And as a country that has made never again its slogan, we want to say never again for Arabs, never again for Muslims in China, never again for Muslims in India, and also recognizing the Armenian genocide. Imagine being a country that was the champion of saving people from one genocide, and yet not being a country that recognizes another genocide. Israel, as of today, doesn't recognize the Armenian genocide. What an embarrassment. What a pathetic embarrassment. Israel could have been the leading country based on its foundation and based on the spirits of its foundation, could have been a country that leads the fight for human rights across the world. But if you want to do that, first you need to clean house, fix things at home before you want to even pretend to do that. But no, you have to be one of the leading countries when it comes to violating human rights. Congratulations. Okay.
Well, we covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah, we did good.
Well, thank you for joining us, Vikram.
Of course,
We've
and
been
thank
going
you
for 2
for
hours.
taking
Holy
up
crap.
your time for this. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. Did we answer your questions, Vikram?
Yeah. Oh, you answered way more too. So I'm really happy.
Awesome.
All right, cool. That was good. I think that was productive. All right, guys. Alexa, I don't think it's safe for you, but if it is
Alexa
safe,
said that she isn't in Gaza.
Oh, she isn't in Gaza?
No, not currently.
What if she is interested to talk to us one day? Please reach out to us at atheistrepublic.com. Music Guy is saying good stream.
Yay!
Thank you.
And I really liked Alexa's commentary. I thought that was interesting. I hope you come back to more of our streams, Alexa.
Yes. They're saying, who is Vikram? Was he introduced? Vikram is one of our top tier patrons. As a top tier patron, you could request for us to cover a topic like this, and you could come on. So yeah.
Good reminder. And another important reminder, make sure you like this video, because I know, a lot of you stayed for this long, so you better like the video. Also, subscribe, okay, because it's Hikmah, it's Dharma, and it's kosher.
Wait. Let me tell people, I think it works if we actually, because if
Thank
we tell people,
you.
Jim is saying Vikram seems like a good guy. Yeah, it's true. But guys, here's what happens. If you like the video, what happens is that this video will show up on people's feeds that have not subscribed to us more. There's more. So if you want more people to go like, what the hell is this video and why is it on my feed? Then like this video, okay? Because the more you like this video, the more the chances are that people are going to find us in their home feed without being subscribed to us. That's how channels grow, okay? So that's the effect of your liking. So if you want people to be confused of why our videos are showing up on their home,
no, that's not the right framing. If you want to take Atheist Republic to the moon, like that video.
No, confuse the hell out of people. Are like, make more people are like, why is this on my feed? Like this video, okay? And also subscribe to our newsletter, link in the description, and get all our blasphemous art for free if you subscribe. Guys, the next blasphemous art that is coming out, we have blasphemous art every single week. The next one is between Netanyahu and Khamenei, and we're sending that out to our newsletter subscribers soon. So link in the description. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's sexy, it's amazing.
If you want to see one of the craziest pictures of Bibi Netanyahu you've probably ever seen.
Yes. If you want to see Netanyahu and Khamenei, because we told you guys that
like within the next 20 to 48 hours.
Yes, we told you that Khamenei needs Israel, needs Likud, and they need the threat of the Islamic Republic of Iran. We're demonstrating that through love between Khamenei and Netanyahu. It looks really good. It looks really good. Okay, just get that link. See, I love the blasphemous art. Guys, subscribe.
McQueen,
and get that.
I'll be waiting.
All right, subscribe to our newsletter. Coming soon. All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.